Hi there. Would you like to see how the past continuous tense is used in practice? Great. This is how you do it. 1. Watch this video, and before each part, 1 to 10, check if you know all of the words and phrases from the list. 2. If you don't, you can use our Quizlet course to learn them. It is available in 6 languages and it's for free. 3. If you know all of the words and phrases, just listen to the stories. This way, you will practice the past continuous tense, vocabulary, and listening skills. These stories come from this book, so if you like books or need the vocabulary lists and stories in a paper form, you can get the book on Amazon. Link in the description. Are you ready? Let's start. Part 1. Past continuous. While I was watching TV yesterday. Story 1.
Amber, 15 years old, Canada. While I was watching TV yesterday, my dad was cooking dinner for the very first time. He was trying to surprise my mom, who was shopping for a new coat at the mall. My mom loves seafood, so he was making some pasta with shrimp and calamari. I told him to choose something easier, but he is so stubborn. While the pasta was boiling, he was preparing the seafood. I offered to chop an onion and some garlic, but he refused my help. He was getting angry, so I came back to the living room and continued watching my favorite TV show. When I was talking to my friend on the phone a few minutes later, my dad was singing and dancing around the kitchen. It was so cute. I think that he should cook more often because the pasta tasted much better than I expected. My mom loved it too.
Story 2.
Maria, 27 years old, Italy. While I was watching TV yesterday morning, my roommate Julia was getting ready for a job interview. She was putting on different outfits, and I was giving my opinions about each of them to help her choose the best one. While she was changing her clothes, I was waiting in the other room and questioning her, acting like I was the interviewer. After we finally decided what she should wear, I did Julia's hair. While I was brushing it, she was texting her sister. She was asking her for some last-minute advice, so her sister was trying her best to help. The interview went very well, and Julia got the job. She invited me to her favorite restaurant for dinner to celebrate her success.
Story 3.
Mark, 20 years old, USA. While I was watching TV yesterday, my brother Jason was gardening. It's his hobby, so he often does it to relax. When he was cutting the grass and watering the flowers and vegetables, he was listening to some music on his iPod. Our new neighbor Sally was sitting in her garden and watching him. After a while, I noticed that they were chatting with each other. They were talking quite loudly, so I thought that they were arguing. I quickly realized that I was wrong. They were actually flirting. Jason was telling her that her smile was pretty, and she was blushing and smiling from ear to ear. I was hiding behind the TV the whole time because I didn't want them to see that I was watching them. They are both 25, but they were acting like teenagers. I thought that it was funny.
The end of part 1. Part 2. Past continuous. While I was strolling around the park. Story 4.
Rodrigo, 45 years old, Portugal. While I was strolling around the park last Thursday, a firefighter was rescuing a cat that couldn't get down from a tree. The cat was very scared. It was meowing and making other loud noises. The firefighter climbed a tall ladder. He was holding a large net in one hand, but the cat didn't want to jump into it. It was moving higher and higher until it reached the top of the tree. More than 20 people were watching the scene. While some of them were filming it with their phones, a few others were taking photos. About 30 minutes later, the firefighter finally caught the cat. He brought it down to the ground and asked if anyone wanted to take it home. I don't know why, but I said yes. When I was walking back home with my new pet, it was looking at me and purring loudly. We were both very happy.
Story 5.
Selena, 30 years old, USA. While I was strolling around Central Park yesterday, a lovely elderly couple was getting married. They were standing in the middle of the Bow Bridge and looking at each other with so much love in their eyes. There were only a few people with them, so all the guests were standing on the bridge too. When the man and the woman were saying how much they loved each other, everyone was crying. It was a really beautiful moment, so I was crying as well. When the couple was posing for photos after the ceremony, I was looking and smiling at them. A lot of strangers were stopping by to wish them all the best. While I was riding a bike later that day, I was still thinking about it all. It's never too late to find love.
Story 6.
Louis, 17 years old, Scotland. While I was strolling around the park last week, some teenagers were having a picnic. I sat on a bench close to them and started feeding some birds, but I was watching the teens the whole time. They were eating croissants, drinking tea, talking to each other, and joking a lot. After a few minutes, one of the girls noticed that I was looking at them. She invited me to join them, introduced me to her friends, and offered me a cup of tea. Her name was Ali. While she and I were talking about music and movies, her friends were running around and playing frisbee. I had a great time with Ali. She gave me her phone number, so I think I'll call her and ask if she wants to go on a date with me.
The end of Part 2. Part 3. Past continuous. While I was walking home from work. Story 7.
Laura, 35 years old, Poland. While I was walking home from work last Tuesday, I saw my old friend Paulina. We went to primary school together, and we even sat at the same desk in the classroom. I lifted my arm and waved at her, but she didn't see me. She was getting on a bus, so I shouted her name. When I was shouting, she turned around and immediately recognized me. She ran toward me with a huge smile on her face. As she was running, she fell down. She couldn't stand up, so I called an ambulance. It came 5 minutes later, and the doctors allowed me to go to the hospital with Paulina. While we were going to the hospital, I got a call from my husband. He was worried because I wasn't home yet. I told him what happened, and he decided to come to the hospital too. We all spent over 3 hours there. What a day!
Story 8.
Thomas, 67 years old, Wales. While I was walking home from work yesterday, a young man suddenly ran into me. He hit my head and broke my glasses. He said sorry, introduced himself, and promised to pay for new ones. I agreed, but there was still one big problem: I couldn't see anything. I had to get home somehow, so the man offered to walk me home. I didn't really have a choice, so I accepted the offer. When we were crossing the street, someone ran into me again. I almost fell down, but Gerard, the young man, caught me. While we were strolling through town, we met one of Gerard's friends. We talked to her for a while, and she decided to walk the rest of the way with us. When we arrived at my house, I invited them for a coffee. We had a lovely afternoon together, so it wasn't such a bad day after all.
Story 9.
Anika, 26 years old, the Netherlands. While I was walking home from work a week ago, my phone rang. My sister's husband called me to say that she was at the hospital and she was giving birth to their daughter. I was very surprised because my sister was 8 months pregnant at the time. I didn't know why it was happening so early. I quickly took a taxi to the hospital. When we were driving, the car suddenly broke down. The taxi driver had no idea what to do. I didn't have time to wait, so I decided to run. When I finally got to the hospital, my niece was already born. Luckily, she was perfectly healthy. While I was waiting to see her for the first time, I texted my boyfriend to share the news with him. I was so excited to become an aunt.
The end of part 3. Part 4. Past continuous. While I was reading a book. Story 10.
Raya, 40 years old, India. While I was reading a book on Tuesday morning, I fell asleep. I had the strangest dream. In it, I argued with my dog, Chewy. He told me that we wanted to move out of the house because he didn't like my husband. He also complained about the food that I bought for him last week, and he said that I needed to earn more money. Can you believe it? I was trying to say something, but he just didn't want to listen. He turned around and ran out of the house. As I was running around my neighbor's garden to catch Chewy, my dog suddenly disappeared. I was looking for him for over 2 hours, but I couldn't find him. While I was still sleeping, the doorbell rang. When I woke up, I was so happy that it was just a dream.
Story 11.
Emma, 31 years old, USA. While I was reading a book yesterday evening, I received a text message from my best friend, Daniela. She booked a holiday in Mexico for her and her boyfriend, Harry, last week, but they had an argument. He left the house and told her to go to Mexico by herself. She didn't want to do it, so she asked me to go with her. I immediately called her because I wanted to know more. She answered all my questions and told me about the beautiful beaches and the luxurious hotel. I just couldn't say no. While I was packing my suitcase an hour later, I realized that I didn't have a swimming suit. I quickly went to the mall to buy it. When I was shopping, Daniela called me and said that Harry returned home and apologized to her, so they are going to Mexico together. I'm happy for them, but I am also a bit mad at Daniela.
Story 12.
Eva, 16 years old, Sweden. When I was reading a book a few days ago, I found an old photograph between the pages. It was a black and white photo of a beautiful young woman. I didn't recognize her, so I asked my mother about her. My mom said that it was my great-grandmother, Gretchen. Sadly, I never met her because she died in 1999. Mom took a big photo album out of the cupboard and showed me some more pictures of Gretchen. While we were looking at them, the phone rang. It was my great-uncle Sven, Gretchen's brother. I couldn't believe it. He lives in Canada, but he wants to visit Sweden soon. When we were video chatting yesterday, he showed me even more photos of Gretchen and her parents. I can't wait to meet him and hear all of his stories.
The end of Part 4. Part 5. Past continuous. Yesterday at 7 a.m. Story 13.
Matilda, 46 years old, Scotland. Yesterday at 7 a.m., I was lying in bed and simply enjoying the silence in the house. My husband Brian and kids were walking our dog in the park, so I had about an hour just for myself. It was a beautiful Sunday morning, the sun was shining so brightly. My neighbor Sally was sitting in the garden and drinking tea, and her boyfriend Jack was cutting the grass. At 8:15, while Brian and the kids were walking back home, I was making breakfast for the whole family. I was baking some delicious blueberry muffins. About an hour later, we were all eating them and playing board games. We were all laughing so hard and having so much fun. It really was a perfect morning.
Story 14.
Jamie, 14 years old, Canada. Yesterday at 7 a.m., I was tidying up my room. My parents and younger sister were still sleeping, so I was trying my best not to wake them up. Why was I doing it so early on a Saturday morning? Well, my friend Tristan lent me his favorite CD last week, and I didn't have a clue where it was. I was tidying up the mess in my room and searching for it. I was looking everywhere, under the bed, behind the desk, even under the carpet and in the trash can. It simply disappeared. I think that I will have to tell Tristan the truth and buy him a new CD. How will he react? I have no idea, but I hope that he won't be too angry at me.
Story 15.
Jason, 28 years old, USA. Yesterday at 7 a.m., I was getting ready for a trip to New York. I was washing, folding, and packing my clothes. I was also downloading my favorite songs to create a playlist for the long flight from London. Around 7:35, I heard a loud noise. I was pretty sure that it was coming from the apartment above mine, so I went upstairs to check what was happening. It turned out that my new neighbor was repairing the sink in his bathroom. Or I should probably say that he was trying to repair it. He was running around the apartment like a madman. His clothes were completely wet. I wanted to help him, but I didn't know how.
The end of Part 5. Part 6. Past continuous. Yesterday at midnight. Story 16.
Jenna, 30 years old, Canada. Yesterday at midnight, I was celebrating my 30th birthday with my friends. I am not a fan of big parties, so I invited 5 people to a small karaoke bar that we all really like. We were drinking champagne and singing our favorite songs. We didn't even care that a lot of strangers were giving us strange looks. We were having the best time. Around 1 a.m., I noticed that my friends Louis and Henry were standing outside the bar and fighting with each other. I was shocked. Henry hit Louis in the face, and they were both shouting. Why did they attack each other? I have no idea. Neither of them wanted to tell me. They probably drank too much alcohol.
Story 17.
Margaret, 34 years old, Iceland. Yesterday at midnight, my boyfriend John and I were camping under the stars. We were sitting on a blanket outside our tent, drinking hot cocoa and looking at the night sky. We were holding hands, and I was thinking about our future together. We both couldn't sleep, so we decided to go for a walk later that night. We were strolling through a beautiful forest, counting stars, and listening to the sounds of nature. That sounds like a scene from a movie, doesn't it? Well, it definitely felt magical. I didn't know that John could be so romantic. He really surprised me.
Story 18.
Ezra, 17 years old, USA. My brother Dax and I have a tradition. We organize a horror movie marathon every year. Yesterday at midnight, we were watching scary movies with a group of friends. We were all eating way too much popcorn and candy, telling ghost stories, and trying to scare one another. Earlier that night, at about 8 p.m., Dax was baking cookies and preparing other snacks for our guests, and I was decorating the house to create a spooky atmosphere. I was hanging spider webs on the windows and lighting black candles. My friends loved the decorations, which made me really happy.
The end of part 6. Part 7. Past continuous. While my parents were at work. Story 19.
Andy, 11 years old, Australia. Yesterday afternoon, while my parents were still at work, I was listening to music, singing, and dancing in the living room. In my head, I was performing for thousands of people. They were clapping, cheering, and shouting my name. While I was singing one of my favorite songs, I looked out of the window and saw that someone was watching me. It was my classmate Greg. He was standing in my garden and smiling at me. 15 minutes later, he knocked on the door. I was so embarrassed, but I opened it and let him in. He said that he really enjoyed my performance and asked if he could borrow my skateboard. I agreed and offered him a glass of orange juice. At 6 p.m., when my mom and dad returned home, Greg and I were playing video games together.
Story 20.
Lisa, 17 years old, USA. While my parents were at work last Thursday, I was studying for an important exam. I was writing and printing some notes, and my younger sister Katie was painting her nails in her room. As I was studying, I heard a strange noise. I didn't know where it was coming from, so I quickly stood up and went upstairs. When I entered Katie's room, I saw that she wasn't there. I also noticed that the window was open, so I immediately ran out of the house and began looking for her. While I was walking around the neighborhood, I met Katie's friend Luke. At 7:30 p.m., while we were both still searching for her, my sister called me and said that she was at the cinema. I was so angry at her.
Story 21.
Havel, 13 years old, Slovakia. While my parents were at work on Friday, I was watching a TV show in the living room. My brother Peter was playing basketball with his friends, so I was home alone. While I was making some popcorn in the kitchen, the phone rang. I picked it up, but no one said anything. About 5 minutes later, it rang again, and again, all I heard was silence. 10 minutes later, the phone rang once more. This time, someone said that a strange old man was standing outside the house and watching me. I was scared, but I quietly walked to the door to check if anyone was there. I didn't see or hear anybody, but I was still terrified. When my parents came back home at 7 p.m., I was hiding behind the sofa in my room. They thought that I was crazy.
The end of part 7. Part 8. Past continuous. While I was relaxing at home yesterday. Story 22.
Caleb, 36 years old, USA. While I was relaxing at home yesterday, my kids were running around the playground with my friend Katie and watching some cartoons. They were staying at Katie's house for 2 days, so my wife and I finally had some time for ourselves. We woke up at 9 a.m., but we were still lying in bed an hour later. We wanted to rest as much as we could. At 10:30, while we were having breakfast, my friend James messaged me and invited me to go fishing with him and his friend Ryan. I didn't want to leave my wife alone, but she told me to go. While I was fishing, she was listening to her favorite podcasts. That is what she always does to relax. When I returned home in the afternoon, we ordered a pizza and watched a movie together. It was a great day.
Story 23.
Lee, 27 years old, Germany. While I was relaxing at home at about 8 p.m. yesterday, I got a terrifying call from my grandma Ursula. She said that there was a fire in her apartment building, and she couldn't get out of her apartment. She lives close to me, so I quickly took my bike out of the garage and went there. While I was cycling on the sidewalk, a policeman stopped me. He said that I was going too fast. I was trying to explain why, but he gave me a ticket for speeding anyway. When I got to the apartment building, I saw a group of police officers who were helping people get out of their homes. I didn't see my grandma, so I immediately called her. Luckily, she said that she was already waiting for me outside the building. I was so happy that she was safe.
Story 24.
Martha, 61 years old, Australia. A few days ago, I discovered a great app called Be My Eyes. It allows you to become a volunteer and help blind people from all over the world without leaving your house. While I was relaxing at home yesterday, I used the app for the first time. I got a video call from Dimitrios, a lovely young man from Greece. He was getting ready for a date, and he asked me to help him choose which shirt to wear. While he was showing the shirts to me, I was describing them to him and helping him make the decision. After about 10 minutes, he chose a blue one. It was very elegant, and he looked great in it. I am so excited that we connected and that I could help him. When my husband came back home from work at 5 p.m., I was talking to my sister, Jennifer, on the phone. I was telling her about the app. I hope that she will download it too.
The end of part 8. Part 9. Past continuous. While I was taking a train to New York. Story 25.
Felipe, 43 years old, Portugal. While I was taking a train to New York City a few years ago, someone stole my wallet. I was standing next to the window for 3 hours because there weren't any available seats. As I was getting off the train, around 9:45 a.m., I felt that someone was touching my back. There were a lot of people on the train, so I didn't think that it was strange. While I was waiting for a taxi 15 minutes later, I opened my backpack and reached for my wallet. When I saw that it wasn't there, I panicked. I didn't know what to do or where to go. While I was walking through Manhattan, I met 2 police officers. I wanted to talk to them, but I knew very little English. They were asking me questions, but I didn't understand what they were saying. What a nightmare!
Story 26.
Caroline, 22 years old, USA. While I was taking a train to New York last Friday, I made a friend. I usually don't talk to strangers, but there was something so friendly and interesting about this girl that I just had to chat with her. When I got on the train, she was reading a book written by my favorite author, Joyce Carol Oates. She smiled at me and asked if I wanted to sit next to her. I sat down, introduced myself, and we began talking. While we were chatting about books and movies, a man who was sitting in front of us was knitting a hat. He offered to teach us how to knit, and we were both so excited about it. When the train arrived in New York at 11:30 p.m., my new friend Kelly and I were playing cards. She gave me her phone number, so I hope that we will meet again soon.
Story 27.
Emily, 32 years old, USA. While I was taking a train from Pittsburgh to New York City 2 weeks ago, a group of children were running around, crying, and screaming. It was so annoying. I was working on a presentation for an important business meeting in New York, so I was trying to focus. It was impossible. The kids were traveling with their father, but he was talking on the phone all the time. When he finally finished one of his conversations, I decided to talk to him. I told him what his kids were doing, but he didn't care. He was so rude too. I came back to my seat and put on my headphones, but it didn't help, I just couldn't focus. When we arrived in New York at 8 p.m., the children were still screaming. I was so happy that I got off that train.
The end of Part 9. Part 10. Past continuous. While I was cleaning the windows. Story 28.
Angela, 31 years old, Scotland. While I was cleaning the windows in the bedroom yesterday afternoon, my husband was cooking dinner, and our kids were playing football with their classmates in the garden. As I was stepping onto a chair to reach the top of the biggest window, my daughter Lucy kicked a ball really hard. It broke the window, flew into the room, and landed on the bed. I knew that it was an accident, but I was really mad. While I was picking up the pieces of glass from the floor, I cut my hand. It hurt a lot because the cut was very deep. I didn't want to go to the hospital, but my husband didn't listen to me. Around 5 p.m., while we were waiting for a doctor to see me, my hand was still bleeding. It looked like a scene from a horror movie. The blood was everywhere.
Story 29.
Doug, 37 years old, Canada. I love cleaning in the mornings when my wife and kids are still asleep. Many people think that it is strange, but it really relaxes me. While I was cleaning the windows at 7 a.m. last Saturday, the sun was rising. As I was watching it, I saw my friends Stacy and Kevin. They live on the other side of town, so I was really surprised to see them. They were running toward my house and laughing loudly. I thought that they were drunk, and I was right. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. It was Kevin and Stacy. They said that they were returning home from a party and decided to visit me. I didn't let them in because I didn't want to wake my family up.
Story 30.
Peter, 44 years old, Slovenia. While I was cleaning the windows in the living room a few days ago, I saw my neighbor's 14-year-old son. He was hiding behind my garage and smoking a cigarette. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do, but my wife suggested that I should tell the neighbor about it. The next day, while I was walking home after work, I saw that his son was smoking again. I couldn't believe it. I decided to visit my neighbor immediately. When I knocked on the door, I heard that he was running down the stairs. A few seconds later, he opened the door and invited me to come in. While I was telling him about his son, he wasn't even looking at me. I could see that he was very angry and worried.
The end of part 10. Great job completing all of the stories. Well done. You've practiced the past continuous tense, vocabulary, and listening skills. Remember to review the words and phrases you've learned. Try to review the vocabulary every day. Even 5 minutes per day will make you better. And continue learning with our stories. Here are some that you might like. Happy learning.